This podcast is produced by the Harwood Productions Podcast Network. To learn more about the network and to find more of our shows, visit us online at www.harwoodpodcast.com. Hey there guys, and welcome back to another episode of Sketchup, a 3D Toolbox. I'm Cameron Harris, and this is episode number 18. Today we're going to be talking about components. Now, components are very similar to groups, which we talked about several episodes ago, but components are slightly different in that they're a great way to keep different objects in sync. So say, for example, you had multiple instances of the same object in a model, and you wanted to change all of them at once. Rather than going through one by one, components make it very easy to make one change and have it affect all of your models. So let me show you what you can do. So let me start by explaining exactly what a component is, and then I'll show you how to make one. A component, at first glance, looks very much like a group. So today we're actually going to be focusing on this chair right here that we built in one of our previous episodes. And if you haven't been following along with us and you want to follow along today, you can always download this lesson file as it is right now from our website. Just go to our website and find the show notes for this episode, and you can download the lesson file from there and follow along. So once you've got that, you'll notice that we've got this chair here, and if you click on it once, you notice it selects the entire chair. The chair has been grouped, right? So just by clicking on it once, we select everything. We can move this around. It doesn't stick to anything. And if you haven't learned about groups yet, go back and watch our groups episode. But groups are a very nice way of kind of keeping everything contained and separate in your model. Things don't stick to one another. It's very easy to kind of group things and duplicate things. So if I wanted to put this chair over on the other side of this table, for example, I could select it, and then I could use the Move tool, so M to switch to the Move tool, and then hit the Option key to make it the Copy tool. So without the Option key, I click once and I just drag this around wherever I want. With the Option key though, hit the Option key and I can maybe grab it by the leg right there. I can drag a copy of it over to the other side of the table. So I can set it there. And then this is actually a very nice little tip. We talked about the Rotate tool several episodes ago, but there's actually a much easier way to rotate something if it's been made into a group. This doesn't apply to things that are still, like take for our walls, for example here. Our walls are still just raw lines and faces. That's all it is. They aren't grouped. But if it is a group, you can click once, and by switching to the Move tool, hovering over one side of this kind of transparent blue wireframe box that it overlays over the group when you select it, hover over one face of that, and you notice you get these little red plus marks on either on the four edges here. Now those are actually points that if you hover over them, you notice we get what looks like the Rotate tool, a little pop-up there. Now it doesn't switch the Rotate tool, but it basically just turns the Move tool into a Rotate tool. So by clicking once on one of these guys here, we can actually rotate the chair. It doesn't matter which one you grab, it'll work the same either way. And just like with the Rotate tool, we can snap it to the tick marks here. So, for example, we can spin it around 90 degrees like that, or 180 degrees actually, so it's facing the other way. Click once. Very nice. Grab the chair, tuck it in, and there we go. Although it looks like my chair is floating here. My bad. Just snap that down a little bit. Good. Okay, so now we've got two grounded chairs, and they are their own separate groups. You can see, click on one, click on the other. We have two chairs on the table. But what if we change our mind about the design of these chairs later on? Let's say I later on want to maybe have these little lighter colored wooden sticks right here sticking out of the top as well. Have little nuggets on either side there, kind of as a little design accent. I would have to do that to both chairs. Now in that case, it's like, okay, you gotta do it twice, no big deal. But imagine, if you will, if you had, say, 8 or 10 of these chairs around a dining room table. Or it was, say, a chair that, or a table, or any kind of object that you have, 10 or 20 of all in your model, and you want to change every single one and do the exact same thing to every single one, whether it's a change as to the model or a change to the color or textures that you've applied. Say I wanted to make this a lighter wood instead of a darker wood. It would get really complicated and really difficult and time consuming really, really fast. Now, components really help you fix that problem. Now, at first glance, components look very much like groups, but I'm going to show you the differences. So, first of all, I'm just going to undo that chair. So now we're back to just one. Now, to make a component, what you do is you select the object that you want to make a component, you right-click on it, and just like where you have something normally that says make group in this little pop-up here, in this case we've already made this a group, so we get edit group instead of make group. But what we can do is right down here, you notice make component. This is another option that is always there, unless of course you're selecting something that already is a component. So what we can do is if we choose make component, it's going to look like at first glance it just made a group. So this is a nice little tip. To avoid confusion when you're making a component, don't make a group a component. So like this, we've already grouped. If we made it a component, say we wanted to change it later on, normally to edit a group or edit a component, you just double click on it. They function very similarly. Just double click on a group or a component and it takes you into the edit mode where you're back into the raw line and face mode. However, if you have this group and then you make it a component, you have to double click once to get into the component and then double click again to get into the group. And you just have all these different layers you have to go through. It makes it pretty complex. So it's best to work with just raw faces and edges and turn those into a component. So what we can do here is if we want to make this a component, what I would recommend you do is right click on it and choose the explode option from this little drop down menu. Now, explode is basically ungroup. It explodes the group and makes it so that it's back to its raw lines and faces. So choosing explode, you can now see it goes back to the normal mode that we're used to where we have all the faces and all the lines selected. Now this is nice because it's already selected everything that we need. So don't click anywhere else and deselect this, otherwise you'll have to go back and reselect everything again. Make sure that everything is selected. You've just exploded your group, or you've just selected by double-clicking or triple-clicking on the object you want to make a component if you haven't made it a group already. And then right-click on it and choose Make Component. Now this is where it gets a little bit interesting. You notice that instead of just making it a component like it does when we say make a group, it just makes it a group. You notice we get some options up here. It asks us for a little bit more information. This is how you know you're making a component and not a group. First thing it wants us to do is name it. Now every component in your model has to have a unique name. So in this case, I'm just going to name it, let's see here. I'll just give it a simple name, chair. If your model is a little bit more complex, you might want to give it a more descriptive name like dining room chair or living room chair. But we can just go with that. And then actually the rest of this stuff you can, for the most part, leave to its default. Description, you don't really need a description unless you have a lot of components and you need to go back later and figure out which one is which. Gluing, cutting, opening, replace selection with component, leave those all to the default. The only one you want to make sure that is checked is replace selection with component, because it's basically going to delete your chair and replace your chair with the component, if that makes sense. But you won't even notice that. Just make sure that that is checked. So we'll just click create. And now it looks like it's just made a group for us. And just like with a group, we can just, click once on it to select it, or double click on it to go into our editing mode, and now we can make any changes we want. We can use our move tool and move it around with just one click. Very nice. It's separate. It's not sticking to anything. It looks like it's just another group. But it's not. It is a component. And what components, the big difference between groups and components is that when you make a group and you duplicate that group, you make a copy of it, that copy is its own thing. You can do whatever you want to that copy and it won't affect anything else, just that group. However, with a component, any change you make to one component is mirrored across all of the components. All instances of that component will change instantly. So let me show you what I mean by that. Let's do the same thing that we did where we duplicated this chair and put it on the other side of this table. So we'll just select it once, switch to the Move tool, hit the Option key, slide this guy over here on the other side of the table, making sure he's not hovering above the ground. And then, you notice, just like with the group, we get these little plus marks here. We can just click on one of them, swap it around for a 180, and then we can grab this and just tuck it in up against the table. Excellent. So now this looks pretty much exactly the same as what we did before, but let me show you the difference now. Let's say I wanted to add a little bit of detail to the top of one of these chairs. I can select one of the chairs, doesn't matter which one because they're both components. Let's say I want to work with this new one here. I can double click on it and it goes into edit mode. And now what I want to do is I want to add some little bumps right here on either side that are made of the same material as these lighter wooden things here. So I'm just going to draw some squares on the top here using the rectangle tool. Do one there and one there. Good. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the push-pull tool. And I could just pull them up like this, but I want these to be a different texture. And as such, I will need to have a line right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Option key. So I'm pulling up a copy of this. And now you can see that leaves those lines right there. And I only want to pull this up maybe 1 inch. So I'll just type that in there. And now I want to pull this guy up another inch. Good. And now we're going to use a technique we learned in our last episode using the bucket tool, with which we can paint colors and textures onto things in our SketchUp model. You notice when I pulled these up, they kept this kind of dark mahogany style wood texture, but I want them to be this lighter texture. So I'm going to switch to the bucket tool using the B key. And now I'm going to hold down the Command key to go into that little eyedropper and click on that lighter wood to sample it. And you notice in my colors window, which is automatically popped up here, it is now sampled that lighter color wood. And now I can just click on these faces here and change them. Just paint those sides there. Now we'll paint the backs of them here. And I think I missed one right over here. Nope. Excellent. So that's all done. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to the selection tool and close my colors palette here. And now that's it. That's what I wanted. I really like the way that looks. Adds a nice little bit of detail. So I'm just going to double click outside of my group to get out of that. And now when I pull back, look at that. This chair over here, even though I was only working with this chair has the same exact changes to it. These were done completely automatically. I didn't do anything to this chair. Just because these two are components, they were kept in sync almost. It's like synchronizing the changes that you make to either one. Now keep in mind that is only the only changes that are synchronized between them are things like changing a model where we add or subtract something, like we added these little nuggets right here. I don't really know what to call those really, but nugget is the word I'm going to use. And also textures and colors that we change. So we repainted these to be the lighter color wood, and those changed as well. If we had done something like, say, move these, you notice we can still move these however we want. So it's not position that stays in sync, it's changes to the actual component. So that is really nice. Now there's one more thing you need to keep in mind with components, and that is it's very easy to forget that you're dealing with components. So let's say I made another copy of this chair, and I put this in a different room, right? So let's say I have this over here, and I'm just going to rotate it around like that. And let's say I wanted to have this chair be over here in this corner, for example. right up against that wall there. And now I want to have this chair be a slightly different style. So I'm going to go into my component here, and let's say I wanted to add, let's say I wanted to make these little nuggets here a little bit taller. Let's say I wanted to maybe make them another 2 inches taller, say, just to kind of make it look a little bit different. I can double click out of it, and that looks great. And oh dear, it made the exact same changes to these chairs over here. I didn't want that. I wanted to only make the differences, make the changes to that chair over there. But I forgot that it was a component. This will happen to you constantly, and you really have to keep an eye on this, because there's really no way to distinguish between a regular group and a component in SketchUp other than actually going in and changing it. So this is where it gets a little bit interesting. I'm going to undo the changes I made so I keep everything exactly as it was. Now I want to have the changes that I make to this chair only apply to this chair. I want to uncomponent it, if you will. That's probably not a word, but I don't really know how else to say that. So uncomponent it. That is a technical term. What we're going to do is, again, we're going to go back to this little right-click menu here, and you notice that we have some changes here. For one thing, it now says Edit Component. We still have Explode, and that will actually make it a non-component. That'll get it back into its regular raw line and face mode, so that would work. But it's actually way easier to right-click on it, and right in between Edit Component and Explode, we have Make Unique. And what Make Unique will do is, if we click it, nothing really seems to happen, but something actually did happen. I'll show you what exactly I mean. If I were to pull these up, actually, I'll tell you what, I'm going to make something a little bit different this time. I'm going to actually make these wider. I'll make these another 3 inches wider, like that. And now I'm going to click off here. I've made the changes to that chair. Nothing happened to these chairs over here. This is now its own unique group. Now let me show you exactly how far this goes. If I were to select this guy and make a copy of him over here and make some changes to this guy, if I were to, say, draw these guys up, you'll notice this chair over here is still a component. It's just a different component. So any differences, any changes we make to either one of these guys here will affect the other one as well. If we wanted to make another unique thing, we would just have to keep saying make unique, make unique, make unique. If it's just like you're doing just like one instance, like you're just doing one chair, it's fine to say make unique. But if you really want to completely get rid of the component thing, you want to be able to make copies of this chair and make any bizarre changes you want to them without affecting any of the originals, then what you can do is you can select it and say explode. That'll get it into its raw mode. Right click on it again and then say make group. And now, even though it looks exactly the same, you can make a copy of this guy and make any bizarre changes that you want, and it won't affect the original. And by the way, this is actually a really good way to know if you're dealing with a component or not. It's just grab the push-pull tool and just make some bizarre changes that are impossible to ignore. And look and see if that does the same thing to the original. And if it does, then you know you've got a component. If it doesn't, you know that it's completely unique, just a regular group, and you can do whatever you want to it. So components are really very powerful. In this case, as I said before, with 2 objects, it's kind of hard to see the benefit. But imagine, like I said, if you had 10 or 12 of these chairs and you wanted to make changes to every single one. One thing I do want to point out is that this works really well with details. Yes, it works nicely with chairs and furniture and things like that, but imagine if you were to have things like, say, windowsills that you were making for each of these windows, and you had these windowsills everywhere in your model. Like even in this case, we would have 5 of them on these windows. Something that small and that detailed is a pain to duplicate and a pain to go through and do the exact same changes to every last one. So components will really save your life in that case. Well, I hope you found this episode extremely useful when it comes to components and just modeling in general. Components are an amazing way to save time, particularly when you're dealing with more complex models and you have many instances of the same object. There have been times when I've had literally dozens of components, if not hundreds of components, and at the last minute needed to make one change to just one of them, and it ended up saving me probably an hour's worth of time so that I only had to make the change to one of them instead of having to go through all 100 of them. Now, until next time, be sure to visit our website at www.harwoodpodcast.com. We've got some great stuff there for you. We got lesson files, we've got the show notes, we've got everything you could possibly want. And, of course, if you have any questions or comments for me about the show, you can send me an email at cameron@harwoodpodcast.com. Until next time, I'll just say goodbye and good modeling.